Typically, we would also have a board report. This is the time that is usually set aside for that report, and this year we're doing it a little bit differently. We know we gather at a pivotal moment for our nation and for our faith. Our challenge, as we continue to say, is to embrace new ways of listening, new ways of speaking out, new ways to confront and root out the racism that permeates the life we all share. The question now is, are we willing to be changed by what we've started? We've set aside this time to give you a glimpse into the courageous, often agonizing conversations in which your board has done its best to rise to these challenges. 4 trustees, Andrea Briscoe, Rob Eller-Isaacs, Christina Yavera, and Elandria Williams, have agreed to speak to 3 powerful questions. How has your faith prepared you for this moment? What qualities will we need to embody together as we continue the work of building beloved community? And as trustees of our association, what do you need from our people now and in the future as you work to make our promises real? We've asked these 4 brave souls to try their best to tell the truth in love, and we ask no less of you. Our partner, John Saru from Essential Partners, has agreed to moderate the panel, and I will invite John and the panel up to have their conversation.
Here we are. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be invited to serve this profound and vital conversation in this courageous and caring community. I am not a UU, but the more time I spend with you all, the more at home I feel. So thank you. We only have 30 minutes, so we've made some agreements for our time together. We've agreed to stay within some time limits that I'll be keeping. We've agreed to speak from our own perspectives, understanding that each of us has a perspective that helps us all understand the fullness of this community. We've agreed to allow each other to finish speaking, to speak of one another in ways that are within covenant. And to the audience, I just ask to do what you're already doing, which is to support the panel as they seek to speak honestly by listening deeply and generously, trying to hear everybody's voice and what they're bringing. So we'll start with the first question. Christina, how has your faith prepared you for this moment?
I would say that I'm definitely more Universalist than Unitarian. I shout out for the Universalists. I really feel like what drew me to Unitarian Universalism was the fact that my salvation is bound up in all of yours, right? That we are not in this alone, and that where that drew me into my faith is to have circles of accountability, you know, within the work that I do for the faith. So many of those circles have people of color on them, not exclusively, but elders, peers, and youth who continually hold me accountable to the work and to the truth that it is our faith that I'm serving. Our institutions are an expression of that faith that's really easy to see, but it's our Unitarian Universalist faith itself that I'm trying to hold up in my work on the trustees.
Andrea?
So for the whole 18 years of my life, I have been attending a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And throughout the entire time that I've been going to it, I've always learned about the 7 principles, and I've become a leader in my congregation and beyond. And I think I really became inspired when I served on the Youth Caucus staff. And shout out to Youth Caucus. And I came to GA and I saw that the work that we do together is so much bigger than individual congregations, and it's so much bigger than just youth, and it's so much bigger than just me. And I think that really inspired me to continue with my work to bring us closer together and bring justice and love for all of the people in this room and beyond. So, yeah.
Thank you. As a former youth caucus person, I'm always like, yeah, keep going. So I really believe that everybody's the divine. And so when I look at people, I see the divine in them and I see the divine in me, right? And how we see each other in that way. And so when I think about my faith, I've been a Unitarian Universalist since I was in the 4th grade, I think. And so I'm not always all the way a lifer, but really close. But I'm still a little Baptist, you know, and all the way Christian, with a lot of other things intermingled, like the rest of us. And so to me, it's like, how do we ground ourselves in like what our value is as people, and seeing each other's humanity, seeing the God, as I say, the God in each of us, and what that means for our relationships and how we move and how we build. And the only other thing I'd add is that when I was 15, the Journey to Wholeness program came through our church, and Lynn Strauss, our minister, who I will always love for life, really pushed it. So my minister pushed our anti-racism work in our church and pushed us to think about class in our church, which some people I guess don't have, but I had. And then I got to meet a ton of people who were in this room who guided me from 15 and beyond. And they really held me and taught me what it meant. And so I know what whiteness looks like that is pushing against, and that holds me in this faith.
The faith, the church I grew up in taught me to aspire to serve the church universal. At the same time, it was teaching me to aspire to be sensitive to diversity of expression and form. So from the beginning, there was this inherent tension between the one and the many, between Unitarian Universalism as the best possible church in the whole world, that exceptionalism that we are subject to, and a deep, deep respect for differences of opinion. So I was prepared for this moment by people who recognized that though the cornerstone of the church might say truth on it, the truth was a very tangled thicket, and we needed to first and foremost care about each other and listen.
Thank you all. So the second of these big questions, and we'll have up to 3 minutes each, and I know that feels sort of it's too structured, but we want to make space for your organic conversation as well. So the question is, what qualities will we need to embody together as we continue the work of building beloved community? And I'll start again with Christina.
As I considered this question, this was one of the harder ones for me, because the qualities that I bring are not always welcome in UU leadership, right? So I come from a family that comes from South Central Los Angeles and East LA, and the way we move through and speak is not the way I'm moving through and speaking right here, right? And so to bring that fullness to the boardroom, you know, it's like, what quality are we really talking about, right? Are we talking about the quality that will get the work done and get through the white supremacy that is in our water at the board level? Or are we talking about the qualities that my culture values in terms of respect for our elders and collaboration and stepping away from so that others can provide their leadership in a different way. So it's difficult to say what qualities we need together. I think the quality I would hope most for is that we get to a point where any of those are not just welcome, but completely valued and embraced in UU leadership.
I think as a youth on the Board of Trustees, I share a lot of the same sentiment where I come from a very different place in my life than pretty much all of my fellow trustees. And I don't know a lot of the institutional knowledge that they have, and I feel like I sometimes step into the boardroom with a little bit behind of everyone else. And I think one of the qualities that we have to share together is never assuming that we all know what's going on. Because I know personally that I sometimes would be confused, and with my confusion, I knew others would be as well. And I think just having the mutual respect to listen to questions that people have and never say that it was a silly question or something that we should already know is really important. And something that I've learned being on the board this past year has been to really push myself to learn about other cultures and about other generations and about other regional differences. I'm from Philadelphia. I have a lot of different regional knowledge compared to people from the South or people from Minnesota or anywhere else in the world. And I just think that if we stay open to pushing ourselves to learn about our differences while also celebrating each other's commitment to working to further our ends and further what we want to do to help all of our religion move into a more accepting place is something that I really want to see happen on our board.
So my name's Elandria, loving yet contentious, and challenging. So that's what I feel like my role is in life. So here are the qualities I'm gonna say that may come as a shock, surprise, we'll see. Radical transparency. I believe if we don't know how to be radically transparent, then we will never uncover, right? So Yuri Yamamoto and others helped do a book around lay people of color that I'm blessed to be in. There's one around religious professionals of color called Centering. Read both of them. There are no names named. It's like there's stories, but there's some radical transparency that can't be done, right? So we're in a time in our faith where if you can never be radically transparent, right? Like in my community, if you ain't transparent, we got a problem, right? They will find out who is responsible, period. Like it ain't just, oh, they did it. Nah, baby, who did it, right? So like I wanna say like this whole like here all the time is not functional. So we have to fix that. We have to figure out how we can not necessarily debate all the time, but say we come from different spaces, different realities. We've got a minister up here. I'm not one. We have a religious professional. I used to be one, but not now. We have somebody that's amazing and just graduated and is going to Switzerland. Oh, yeah. So we've got all of these different viewpoints. But what does that mean when trying to figure out a decision, right? Because we actually come at things very differently because of our experiences, which is a good thing, but sometimes it also gets in the way because we don't acknowledge we don't sometimes acknowledge those in the front end. So I think the other piece is, so my job is not connected to UUs in any way, shape, or form, except for the people that come that are UUs and organizers and activists and movement people. And so there are times when we have conversations that I'm like, this is not an actual people problem. This is some creative thing, and like really like that, I don't understand why I have to talk about this right now. And so I do want to say that if we're going to really transform and actually be rooted in reality, and for people's lived experience that come in, like I want my brother to be able to be in this faith, and he can't, even though he grew up in it. And so like, what does that mean for me as a board member and shifting this culture so that my brother can get hope, right? Even in the midst of our board conversations, because things are happening in all of our lives, and sometimes we can hyper-focus on minutia, which kind of isn't really that crucial. The last thing I'd say, oh goodness. how to say this in a way that makes really good sense, is that I think we have to take a lot of giant leaps. A lot of giant leaps. And to me, it's beyond rewriting the bylaws. It's a lot of giant leaps around just like saying, you know what, I'm gonna put myself all the way out there and say the things that may come back at me in a way that's painful, but is my truth. And knowing that we have to figure out how we share our truths in a way and hold each other in love.
I need to be radically transparent about who I am and what I believe and what I think without being overwhelming, without taking up too much space, which is an issue for me. I believe there's a difference between being radically transparent about myself and my view of a situation and reading one another's inventory. I think to be radically transparent in determining who it is we think is responsible, I don't know that that's the way to go because I feel responsible. Yeah. And for us to hold hands and acknowledge both our obligations and our complicity, to try to engage one another at depth as human beings, these are challenging things. This is religious practice at its deepest and its hardest. I gotta tell you, this is you I'm talking to now, I gotta tell you, this is not easy. The quality of conversation that we do our best to achieve is often agonizingly difficult. So qualities that I want to embody are a deep commitment to my own practice and support for other people to take the time they need to bring their best self, to bring my best self to the board table and to the conversation out of which our future is being shaped. So practice. And I'm with you on the radical transparency thing. And that means not shrinking when I'm afraid I'm going to be called a racist, patriarchal, old minister. Do you have any time? One of the tensions here is that the church that doesn't work for your brother has made my life what it is. So when we talk about, we're not talking about tweaking here, we're talking about radically changing the very thing that has been the primary source of nourishment and inspiration in my life. And I get a little reactive around this. So the church that taught me to think in terms of the church universal, the church that taught me that there are no other people's children, is now being threatened at its core in a way that might actually force it to fulfill its highest aspirations.
So we wanted to make sure it wasn't just a question and answer down the road, but to have some time for some genuine curiosity of one another and reflecting with one another. And so we have about 10 minutes, and I'll open the floor to you all. I invite you to think about questions that might come from something you heard here in the last few minutes that you'd like to know more about, that you're curious to explore more with each other, or a reflection that you have of your own.
I think getting to that question of what is at the core of Unitarian Universalism. I mean, we heard some of that from Sophia this morning, right? And I think that's where I disagree, because I think it's that core that is drawing all of these different people to Unitarian Universalism. And it's that core that we're trying to express in a different way. So I don't see the core being at risk, right? I see the expression of that core being at risk.
Yes.
And I see that that's where the pushback is coming of saying, no, I love that core. I fully believe that Unitarian Universalism has, at its deepest moments, the possibility of our mutual liberation globally. But it's that expression of it that prevents us from, as you say, reaching that aspiration. And so I wonder, if we were different in that expression, what minister would you be now? And would it not be even more?
The thing I think about, so I have liberation tattooed on my arm, and the chalice is inside the O, right? Because Unitarianism, Universalism, for me, has been a liberating ministry, like it has been for a lot of us. And so we grew up UU, and so I don't think it's the UU faith that is the problem. I think one thing I think is just a challenge, right? When you go from being a youth and you get to create your own universe, and then you walk into the church and you're like, oh, we have no control whatsoever of what is about to get said, sung, talked about, nothing. And you're like, well, this is not what I like, and I have no power to change it. Well, guess I'll go somewhere else, or take a nap on Sunday morning, right? So I think like that's the challenge. So like you literally take, and you went through this, so you take young people where you have control and input and everything, and you can construct the world you want to live in, right? So we constructed, and there were way more youth of color, we constructed like how we wanted our faith to be lived in the world. And like when it stopped brutality, when it stopped people like beating up gay kids, stopped all these things within our faith group, right? And then you come and you leave and now you're listening. And then our churches can look how many different ways. I've been to a lot of churches. And I'll tell you, they don't all look the same. You wouldn't know UU church from the other half the time. And so then you move to another place and then the church looks totally different from the church you grew up in. So you don't even feel like you're still in the same faith sometimes. So like some of it is what we have to do as a board level, but others of it, let's be honest, is like, do our churches all hold the same value set? Like, are we all actually moving together in the same way or not? And like, are we actually willing to like go? And so if somebody like me walks in, who's been a UU for a long time, and the other thing I'd say is an embodied quality I didn't say earlier, is we have to teach each other our history. And we have to teach and we have to do leadership development. We don't do good leadership development. And so if we come on the board and people don't know information, they're not supposed to know it. They haven't been there. And so we haven't also done a good job as a faith of like really sharing and helping people learn and grow and move from and not be stuck in.
Alandria, what you were saying about when you're a youth, you make this whole universe, and Unitarian Universalism is a whole different thing to me. One thing that I've realized being on the Board of Trustees this year is that Unitarian Universalism for me is so different than other generations. And I think it's so interesting that I was confused about the controversy of moving towards a less white supremacist UUA, because that's something that the youth have always been holding as a core part of what we believe Unitarian Universalism to be. So when you said that, it brought up so much for me.
And I think that's what the white supremacy teach-in, I mean, that's one of the lessons I drew away from that, is that there is a hunger in our congregations to really understand what radical change might look like, and what that radical change might look like for white people in our congregations and for people of color. And that there is a hunger for our leadership, frankly, on the board. We have never gotten the amount of correspondence that we got in the past 2 months over all of this. Y'all wrote to us like day and night.
Thank you.
And it was wonderful. Like, there is a hunger for the Board of Trustees to really take hold of that leadership and make sure that we are all going in the same direction, and acknowledging that that direction is going to be hard, it is going to be uncomfortable, it is not just uncomfortable, it is painful, right? For a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons. And that we need to be in that together, and we can be in that together because we're Unitarian Universalists. Like, that core is what holds us together as we go through this pain and discomfort. So yeah, I mean, I think the youth get it because y'all been doing it, right?
And we've been doing it for a very long time.
That's right.
Let the old man speak and say, when you say the word always, we've always been committed to this work. We've always been committed to building beloved community. I chaired the first youth caucus.
Yep.
And it was at a time when we were as convinced as we are right now that we are at a watershed moment.
Yep.
And that if we can just focus and move forward together somehow, we can begin to be more fully the people we claim we want to be. And I grew up just as you did and as you did, shaping our own worship services and finding our own music. And frankly, I fell in love with the old ways. And I've lived my life in gratitude. And that's another value that I think we need to embody, all and each of us, each and all of us. Not falling in love with the old ways necessarily, but moving through the world with deep gratitude for the container, which is the church. Moving through the world, willing to change it and willing to be changed by it, but at the same time, moving out of gratitude at least as much as we move out of outrage. For me, that has been, that balance, striking that balance between gratitude and outrage, between social justice and spiritual development, if you want to frame it that way, has been the central task of ministry for me. And I think it's the central task of ministry for us as a movement.
Yeah. And my hope is that people hold that I believe that in order to do spiritual formation, that is justice work.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, those are not separate. Like spiritual formation is justice work. So like, I work at a place that we call Movement Church, right at the Highlander Center. And so when people come in, we're doing spiritual work because people are in trauma. People are in grief. People are in pain. People are also like thrilled and glorious and happy and embodied and are like, yay for joy. But it's all spirit work, right? And whether you, or nature, whatever you call it, right? Because we're going to be all pluralistic, whatever words you use, but it's all connected and entwined.
Because so often we hear that. That's what we hear from folks. Well, I don't want to do racial justice this week. I want to do spiritual development. Right? I know, but this is what, let's be real, this is what we hear out in our congregations. Yeah. And so that work of saying, I would like to not do racial justice either, but it's my life, right? Yeah. It's my children being stopped by the police. It's me being stopped and, am I going to get deported? It's not something, the privilege of setting it down and seeing that as in favor of doing spiritual development. We just can't, and I understand you're saying the balance, but I think the intersectionality of it is really where we're trying to get people to go. And I think that I get the gratitude, but what I see moving people is the outrage, right? And I think that's a hard place to be in for a really long time. And so I think, yeah, watershed, absolutely. We need it.
Outrage is effective short-term, and it's not sustainable.
No. We don't want it to be sustainable.
Gratitude, that's right.
We don't.
Gratitude for me is sustainable as a motivator, and that's really all I'm talking about. One more thing.
It can be your last.
One more thing.
Quickly.
I'll try to be very quick. When we proposed, you remember when we wrote the charge to the interim co-president's team and we proposed the creation of the commission? Some people thought we were proposing the commission of the commission as yet another coordinating body or support body for racial justice work.
That's right.
And that it was very important, but one aspect of the work that we were asking them to look at, when in fact what we were doing was asking that a commission be formed to reinvent the way we live together, the way we make decisions, the way, all of it. Take a look at all of it, because our way of doing business is in the way of our faith.
Yes.
So I often describe being a facilitator as just being a professional interrupter of good conversations. We only have a couple minutes left, and we want to go out with about 30 seconds if we can. If you can answer for us as trustees of our association, what do you need from our people now and in the future as you work to make our promises real? Okay, as trustees of our association, what do you need from our people now and in the future as you work to make our promises real?
I need that willingness to go into the difficult place and stay there for a while. I think, I say we don't need more politicians, we don't need more bankers, we don't need more, folks in corporate America. We need more Unitarian Universalist politicians. We need more Unitarian Universalist bankers. We need Unitarian Universalism to be the core identity, not just on Sunday, but on every other day of the week.
I think one thing that I found incredibly inspiring this year was the sheer number of correspondence that we got this year, and it's, to my knowledge, that it's never happened to that extent before. And I think that trusting that our leaders are doing good things, but also having the will to reach out to us and give us the information that you might have that we're not thinking about, and just showing us that you're passionate about what we're doing in either a good or a bad way, and keeping us driven to do things. Because when we're just around the board table talking about finances or talking about things that might not seem like they're doing good work, it's important for us to remember that you all care and that we're doing it for a reason.
You want me to go? All right. All right, so I'm talking to the old white people now. The rest of you can listen in if you're interested. Not sure why you would be. So what I know is that that I don't know how to do this. And I actually know that you don't know how to do this either. So that means we need to be humble, which is not our long suit. It means that we need to set aside our exceptionalism and get that we need a lot of the same stuff that everybody else needs, like breathe deeply, listen carefully. It's very hard what we're trying to do, and it is going to change everything. So what I need is for you to join me in leaning in and stepping back. It's another thing we learned from the youth. That's what I need. Don't think you know, because you don't. And if you think you know the truth, you don't. The truth is a tangled thicket.
Oh, I'm going. So there are two pieces. To all of my white brethren in the room, old, young, and otherwise, and especially women and trans people and genderqueer folks. Listen to the people of color around you. Assume that they know and that we're not actually the same and that we don't share the same experiences. I would also say that sometimes just shut up. Just sometimes go, you know what? If all of you are saying it, okay. And like, I don't actually have to be the one to say this is the way I want to make it happen. And to say, you know what? You might actually know something and not argue with me for, I don't know, 2 weeks at a time around stuff that we could have just been dealt with. That's one. For all of my people of color, indigenous folks, all the ways we identify, step out the whiteness. So I'm saying this on purpose, and I'm going to go a little over because it's really important. We have to step out of the whiteness ourselves and be grounded in who the hell we are and bring it. Because if we don't step out of the whiteness, whether it's with our partners, whether it's with our families, whether it's with anything, we will always bring white supremacy into the room. That's right. Ourselves. Sure. And so if we're going to dismantle white supremacy, it is not just the white people who have to dismantle it. We must dismantle it in our own ways of being, ourselves. And then trust, like we did in our board table. We have a people of color caucus on our board, which has not happened that we do. Thank you, amen, for Greg Boyd in the audience. Do that in your churches. Do that in your boards. It's more powerful, it's strategic, and it makes you stronger.
All right. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Christina, Andrea, Elandria, Rob for their voices, their stories, their committed service to our community.
Thank you, John.